Okay. Okay, so we are talking about lesson 5, which is a practice lesson. So they've learned everything, hopefully, so far. Let's first talk about what the goals of this lesson are.
So the goals of this lesson kind of like extend from lesson 4, which is being able to differentiate between a part and a whole, and finding either the part or the whole when reading the problem.
And how has this been going?
So today we started cross multiplication,
Okay.
because before we did ratio problems, we were just like scaling up or scaling down. So today we started cross multiplication, and I gave them the calculator because the goal was to make sure that like they understand like how to actually set up the problem.
Mhm.
And I think it went pretty well. We did not get to lesson 4 as yet, but because lesson 3 also deals with like, is it a part or is it a whole? It's just basically like the same idea extending into 4 and 5.
Okay. So with this being lesson 5 and like assuming that kids have now had the exposure to problems where they're looking for the part when they're given the part percent, or when they're given the whole and they're given the part number and percent, how do you like want them to go about doing these problems? This is like a lot of problems.
So lesson 3 has scaffolded setting up the ratio proportion, basically like giving them the description for the part and the whole.
Okay.
So basically what I said to them is that like as you're setting it up, they also had an opportunity where they had to come up with their own descriptions. But I don't think that that's like the primary focus. Like they need to be able to like read and like identify the part and the whole. But whenever they see percent, kind of like immediately taking that out and knowing that percent is out of 100. So if you're getting a part of the percent, you should immediately know that you're putting whatever that number is over 100.
Okay, so things that they should also be able to understand are like what the percentage represents, how to like relate that to the whole of a percent, which is always 100. And how are they doing with like matching up, like not putting percent in the non-percent section?
They've been doing pretty decent with that. I think for the most part, students have been getting that. Because whenever they take the percent out, I always ask them like what does percent mean? It's like a rate of 100. So they know if it's like 75%, it's 75 to 100. So kind of like immediately taking that part of the problem out and then going back in for like the context clues. I think like lesson 3, they had like a great example with like, I think it was like task 8, question 1, where it was like, oh, there's like 30 questions on the test versus like a student getting 30 questions correct. So then understanding the difference between the two different contexts.
So obviously in this lesson, we want them to be able to like label and set up cross multiplication and carry out that procedure. Have they been, you know how I feel about the double number line, but like,
yes,
have they been using that as a tool, or are we like more so relying on the cross multiplication?
No, cross multiplication. So for lessons 1 and 2, it was explicitly like double number line or the bar model, but like lesson 3 definitely like had to move away from that. So even though there were still examples there, we primarily focus on setting up the ratio proportion because I feel like that's a skill that they need to learn.
Okay. I agree, that's a skill they need to learn. It will be helpful for them on the IA.
But then also like understanding that like to find 10% of a number, you need to divide that value by 10, and kind of like tying that into them already understanding that if you need to find 50% of something, you're dividing it by 2. Because it's like 1 to
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about the launch of this lesson. So in the lesson plan, what do you notice about how this lesson should be launched?
So in this particular lesson, we're talking about the 3-read strategy again. So kind of like the first read, second read, third read. And it goes pretty much like back to what they were doing earlier on in the earlier units with word problems. It's like the first time you read the problem, don't worry about the numbers, understand the story. And I think that's very important because that's where you're going to understand the context of actually like what the numbers mean. And kind of like the second time you read it, what are the quantities that can be measured? And that's when they should be able to like relate the number back to like what's actually happening in the story itself. Like if 86 is in the problem, is it 86 seniors or 86 people that voted for something as an example?
Okay, so let's run through the launch. We're gonna ignore the do now because that's gonna be like quick and dirty.
Okay.
Let's look at, so the launch should be done with task A, number 1. And so I want you to launch it to me and I may throw you some misconception.
Okay. All right, so we have already started working on finding the percent of either a part or a whole. So what we're gonna be doing today is very similar to what we did in lessons 3 and 4. But as I'm walking around today, even though you have a double number line as a tool, I want you to primarily focus on the proportion equation. So the first thing I want you guys to do is read the question. Make sure that you are thinking about what percent means, and whenever you see percent, you know that it's out of 100. Then I want you to go down to where it says set up a proportion equation. And after you read the question, I want you to write a description for what you're going to put at the top to describe the part, and how can you describe the whole at the bottom. So can you tell me what you need to do when you start working?
Read the question, fill out the proportion.
And when you're filling out the proportion, what are you thinking about? Because there's 2 different things that you have to write.
What's the part and what's the whole?
Okay.
Okay, so I want you to look at the lesson plan guidance. And so how could you like use the language from the 3 reads strategy to like actually facilitate this whole class?
Oh, okay. So like the first time you read the problem, I'm gonna actually be walking around. No one is actually writing any numbers down right now. Just read the problem so you can understand the problem.
Okay,
If you wanna jot down something that you understand from it, that's great, but don't focus on the numbers.
okay,
Then the second time you guys read the problems, I'm gonna do
so
a,
just pause there. Would you have us do that before you say the second time?
yes.
Okay, so
So
why don't
the
you?
first time,
Mhm,
actually, I'm gonna front load it for them because I feel like some kids get like antsy about like,
Okay.
oh, what do I do next? So
Okay,
I'm gonna be like, we're reading the problem 3 times. The first time you read it, I'm gonna be doing a lap around. I wanna see you like not focusing on the numbers. You're reading the problem only to understand what is actually happening.
mhm,
The second time when I do my lap around, and I'm gonna announce this again when I do that second lap,
mhm,
you are going to be writing down where it says identify the part as a number, the whole as a number, the part as a percent, the whole as a percent. Whatever you don't know, you know that you need to put a variable there to represent the unknown.
okay, so that is a lot of language and a lot of steps. So what is gonna be important, like, as you launch this?
They need to have, it needs to be concise. What am I doing the first time?
Mhm.
And then when I come around to check the second time, what do you need to have on your paper?
Yeah, and how else can you make that clear for them in the room, aside from you saying it?
I'm gonna put this up on the screen.
Yeah.
So this 3-way strategy right here,
Mhm.
so that they know the 3 different questions that they can ask the second time they're reading it, what they need to look for.
They've seen this before,
Yes, yeah.
so like, this shouldn't be a surprise, but
Mhm.
in the context of like this kind of problem, they should have a visual of it always, especially as we gear up for like testing, they need to be able to do this independently.
Okay.
What does your discussion look like of the 3-read strategy?
So as they go back in, just kind of like the first time after they read it, kind of like, what is this problem about?
So you're gonna pause them
Yeah,
after the first lap?
no, after they're finished with the 3, you said the discussion after.
Yeah, so you're gonna have
after
them
they're
do the
finished
3
with
reads, then you're gonna discuss
Yes.
it. Okay, so what are you gonna say?
So it's like the first time you read the problem, what were you thinking about? What's happening in this problem?
Okay, so I'm gonna say it's about people who went to a concert.
Okay. And then I'm gonna ask someone else to expand on that, like, can you add on and be more specific?
Okay,
So maybe someone is probably gonna, yeah, so can you add on and be more specific?
people who got to the concert late.
Right, is there any other information that we got from this problem?
Some people didn't attend late.
Okay, so we know that some people got to the concert late, and then we know that some people, what do you mean by they didn't attend late?
Like they got there on time.
Okay, can you tell me where in the problem you see that people got there on time?
Because some people attended the concert and some people attended late.
Okay,
So the people who
some-
weren't late were on time.
Okay, so some people got there late, and then some people actually, then some people attended the concert. So let's see if you're going back in and finding the exact language and the problem. All right, so how can we take that information and think about the part and also think about the whole? Because we need to have a description for both the part and the whole. So what do you think the whole is right here? The people who attended
Okay, I'm
late?
gonna pause you here. Use the questions from the second read.
Okay,
So we get to which quantities are the part and the whole, but first let's get to like what the quantities are.
okay,
And so this could be an opportunity to like have them turn and talk. I know that can be like a scary thing, but we want them, like, you could pose these 3 questions, talk about these with your neighbor, and then cold call kids.
okay.
What do you think about that?
That's fine. No, we have been doing, like partner checks and so forth. So,
Great.
yeah, and because none of the questions are on the board, they kind of have some leverage there as to like which question they're going to ask first. So they can do like a 1 minute turn to talk. I can listen in, and then we can have a few students share out.
And you're strategically picking kids, like you're going over to kids, I'm gonna call on you for A, because you know that like they have a solid answer. Okay. The third read, like our strategies are given to us, so I wouldn't spend too much time here. We're using cross multiplication. And then they do it.
Yeah.
So how will the like a strong launch of this support them with the rest of the problems?
They should be able to use a 3-read strategy, to work on the rest of the problems independently. I feel like some kids may just immediately trying to solve. And then because they're trying to solve, they may get like the different parts mixed up, the parts versus the whole. So kind of like continuing to hold them accountable. If I see like a student like going straight into like setting it up, it's just like go back and read the problem. And I think kind of like identifying what's actually happening in the problem, so you can like write that down on your paper. So as they're doing this, like when I'm doing my first one, like I should be walking around and seeing like students that are jumping their paper. About what's happening.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk so we've launched number 1. 2, there's a lot of problems here. So one thing about this lesson that is like critical is that we need to use this exit ticket for like information for our future lessons. So we need to make sure we get to it. We don't have to get to every single other question. So knowing that, like, that's okay. Let's prioritize some of the ones in the beginning to like heavily data track so that we know we're choosing ones kids are actually doing.
Okay.
So first, like, how do you want kids to go about working through this? Do you want them to work in pairs? Do you want them to work independently?
I want them to work independently.
Why?
Because a lot of times when students are working in pairs, either one person is doing the work or they're not holding each other accountable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you done any like situations where they're working independently, but they like, you have like 5 minutes to do this first one and then they can like check with each other?
Yes, sometimes the lesson plans also like make that like explicit. So it's like, oh, like you work on it, do that for 4 minutes, you check in with your partner for 2 minutes, and then you have like a 3-minute disclosure.
In this lesson plan, it does advise to allow them to work in partners.
Okay.
I think like I trust your judgment on whether that's gonna be productive or not. But I do think because I don't want you to be like spread so thin going to every single kid and saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I think it could be beneficial to be like 5 minutes solo, 2 minutes partner, 5 minutes solo, 2 minutes partner as like a scaffold into working together.
Okay.
You feel okay trying that?
Yeah, that's fine.
And if it's unproductive, like shut it down.
Yeah, I mean, the author should be there, so that should be good.
Okay. Okay, so which are the problems that you feel like should be the ones that we are more heavily data tracking during the lesson to see if we need to like pause or like pull a group to the side or anything?
Well, question 1, because that's the launch, to see like how students are building those habits. So like tracking that from mostly habits and not necessarily concept.
Okay.
I think question 2, because question 2 is like talking about like how many hours in a day. And I see like, a lot of time they questions where it has to do with like a week or a day, and they need to like understand that.
Do you think that they're gonna understand this pie chart? Like, have they seen a pie chart before?
They haven't seen, I mean, they haven't for the do now. They have something similar for the do now without like all the numbers.
Oh, true.
Yeah. But I feel like this pie chart, we can also like give them 1 minute to like observe it, and then take another minute to like talk to your partner. What do you think this pie chart means? And how does it relate to like having 24 hours in your day?
Okay, yeah, and it also says like 24 hours in, I mean, I surely hope that they know that there's 24 hours in a day, but it also
I asked them how many days they come to school, and somebody said 7.
Maybe that's how it feels to them. Maybe that's what they wish was true. But it does say 24 hours here. So kids who get this wrong might not understand the pie chart. They might not understand that it's the 24. What are some other like big misconceptions that we could have
For this question?
Yeah.
Question number 2.
Yeah.
Thinking that the percentage is actually like the value.
Yeah. So this one, what's like what's it called? The concept that we're looking for here in our data tracking.
So I feel like students need to understand, like, whenever they see the percent symbol, that like if something is being like partitioned like this, it's gonna add back up to 100%.
Okay.
So every part of this is like a part in relation to the whole 100%.
So potentially like what we're looking for our conceptual like understanding is that our parts and wholes are correctly identified in this section, and like that's what you're worried about here. We are also worried about cross multiplication, but like if they can't get this
Like
right,
that part, yeah,
if they can't get this right, then like they're not gonna know this procedure is gonna be wrong.
yeah.
Okay, so if you see students, so this is our like conceptual understanding that we're tracking for, our students putting these values in the right places here to understand what's a part and what's a whole. If you see kids as you're walking around getting this wrong, what are you gonna say to them?
Getting what wrong? The values,
yeah,
or
the values.
Go back to the 3-read strategy. So even though here, like, you're not like reading a lot of information, you have to interpret the information that you have in the pie graph. So I feel like going back to that and then kind of like, what are we actually identifying? Because here's like how many hours she spent doing homework. So it's like you need to actually look at the section that says homework and then move from there.
So,
but I feel like they're gonna have a problem, like even though it says 10%, they're gonna have a problem going back and understanding that it's 10% of a 24-hour day. So
what do you mean? Like they're not gonna know to write 24 as the whole as a number?
yeah, I feel like some students may not understand that. So I think like just prefacing that for them, like there's 24 hours in a day and this is Becky's day. So even though this is like partition, she's doing different things percentage wise, like this is actually representing the whole 24 hours.
So that's why this 3-read strategy, like A, B, and C questioning is really important. Is which quantities can be measured or counted. And so in this question, a quantity that can be measured is the 24 hours. And so you could ask that question, like, what are the quantities that can be counted or measured relevant to this problem? It's going to be 10, it's going to be 100, it's going to be, and then they're going to be like, I don't know what else. Read the full problem. What's another quantity that it gives you? 24. Okay, is that a part or a whole?
Okay.
What do you think about that? Okay, run that back.
So basically, they're going to be reading it, relating it back to which quantities can be measured or counted, and then
say it to me. So like, Miss Bennett, I don't get this. What's the whole? Like, there's no numbers here.
Okay, so what I want you to do is go back and read the question, read the statement at the top.
Okay.
And then I want you to think about that statement as you're looking at this visual right now. So it says Becky's day, and what did we get from that statement that we read about Becky? The first statement at the top.
This chart shows how she spends her day.
Okay, can you go back and read it again and tell me if you see any quantities there?
Becky made a pie chart to show how she spends her 24 hours a day.
24 hours in a day. So then when we're looking at Becky's day, how many hours do you think she has in that whole day?
24.
How do you know that?
It says it, and there's 24 hours in a day.
Okay, so now that you know the value, is that gonna be the part or the whole?
The whole.
Okay.
Okay. Good. My only piece of feedback there is that like you could cut that in half.
Okay.
So I would just ask like what quantities can be counted. See what they say. If they don't say this, say what else does it say in the question statement?
Okay.
And then is that a part or a whole? And then leave.
Okay.
You don't need to be there when they have the aha moment.
Okay.
Ask the questions and bounce to the next person.
Okay.
And for you and Andrew, like that is your biggest fault, is that you like to be there from start to finish. And sometimes we like, I want you as a goal for this, you need to get to every single student while they're doing number 2.
Okay.
Every single student in your group.
Okay. I think because sometimes like we prioritize like students with like IEPs and just like thinking, okay, well, based on their goal, and a lot of students like they need a lot of scaffolding, so we do spend a lot more time with those particular students.
Yeah, but you can also use, so like 2 and 3 are the same. 2 and 3 are the same. They're both looking for the part as a number, the whole as a number is given. The part as a percent is given. It's the same question with different numbers. But like with weird elements, so that may be tricky, but if kids get two wrong, you're using that data to then, you're not tracking number three. You're using it for number three. So like, if 4 kids over here got two wrong and everyone else got it right, you 4 come with me right over here. We're gonna do number three together.
Okay.
Or I'm checking in more in depth with you guys during number three. That's why I'm using the data that I collected in number two.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So 2 is a data collection. 3 is an implement. If they're all getting it wrong, then what do you think you should do?
We're going back to the 3D strategy because they weren't
Yeah.
invested in it. They weren't fully invested in using it.
Potentially, yes. And we may need to like review what we did for number 1 before we send them off to number 3. Number 4, how is number 4 different from 2 and 3?
I mean, we don't have the,
We don't have a pie chart, true.
and it's going back to kind of like the problems they've seen before, where it's just kind of like a statement and they have to check the information.
Look deeper.
They also have, I mean, they're given a part, they need to put the whole,
Yes.
so.
This can often be trickier because they're like, especially because the first 3, they're looking for the part. This is something that you're gonna wanna look for in terms of are they like reading closely that they're missing the whole now. Okay. Let's fast forward to our hard stop of what, like 15 minutes before the class period ends to do the exit ticket. What does our like discussion of this look like?
I think, going back to kind of like, what are some of the habits that you used
Okay.
to help you answer these questions? And I think maybe someone is gonna probably like talk about how they were able to use the 3 strategy and apply it to the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a child's probably gonna like express like how they maybe were confused at first, but they went back to think about the quantities that they could count. How can you continue to use those same skills when you see similar problems in the future?
Mm-hmm. There's so great, because I think that's a big growth for you from like going over each problem individually, like in depth. You don't need to do that. I think you should either have kids who got it right share out the answers, or like you just share out the answers for the first few that you know that they did. I think your questions are good, and then there's also some guidance on questions here, like what was challenging, why do we have to identify the parts and the wholes, like how can you use context clues. But I think like some are more like, we've talked about this, more like summary questions instead of step-by-step questions. One last piece that we didn't actually talk about is like the procedure of the cross multiplication. So they started that today.
Yes.
You think like are they struggling more? Like my understanding is that they're struggling more with like identification of part and whole versus the procedure of cross multiplication, especially since they have calculators.
Yes.
Okay, so we think like that's not, like, we agree that the identification of part and whole is the more important part to track versus the.
Yes, which I think why having like the 3 strategy as more of a like explicit guidance would be helpful for now.
Okay. Okay, so why don't you summarize some of the things that you're taking away from this chat?
So, number 1, making sure that like we have a visual in the classroom where everyone can have access to those 3 strategies. Be concise in directions that I'm giving the students. Make sure that I'm intentional with data tracking. These are a lot of questions, but how I can actually like use one question to help with another. As I'm doing my lap around, make sure that students are actually implementing practice and implementing the concept.
And we have a physical tracker that is.
Yes, I've been using a physical tracker.
How's that been going?
It's been going great because like doing the lap around kind of like similar with iReady. So I can have like a visual cue of like what students who understands what. Great. And then like when we're doing like our questioning, then I can call on the students that may have been struggling much before.
Great.
Sorry.
Okay, I interrupted you with other things you were taking away.
Yeah, and then I feel like more student talk, like having the students like share out the correct answers, I think is also good. Not spending time. I've been focusing a lot more on that, like not spending time reviewing work or doing the work on the board. having them share it out. If there are like multiple students with a misconception, just pull them in a moment and like do that brief in the back
Mhm.
with a small group. And make sure that like they understand like the habits that they need to be thinking about as they go into completing the exit ticket.
Great. Okay, so this lesson is on Thursday.
Yes.
So in addition to looking, I haven't looked at what questions are on the mastery check this week, but let's definitely look at this during our afternoon meeting on Thursday.
On Thursday, okay. Question about.
Yeah.
Question about the mastery check.
Yes.
Do they still have only 20 minutes